So here we all are again, trying to remember that we're not stuck in the house. We're safe in the house. Yeah. Okay. That having been said, today, while I was safe in my house, I decided to do some baking and I posted about it, and it led to tonight's reading because every day I kind of figure this thing out on the fly. So I was baking and I posted that I was baking, and a friend of mine in Israel had texted me and said, oh, you're the person that, that I want to be locked down with. Like, you're the one we need in a crisis situation, because like you're going to be the one who's baking and doing all this stuff. And it absolutely triggered this buried traumatic memory that made me make sense of like a giant chunk of my life, because apparently that's what happens when you've been locked down forever. So here's the deal. I was like maybe in second grade in New Jersey, and Sister Mary Blackendecker, or whatever her name was, at St. Mary's Catholic School came up with this great prompt, this writing prompt. And when I say great, I mean utterly traumatic. So the prompt was this: you're in a shipwreck and there's only one lifeboat, and you're going to have to go to this deserted island, and you have to convince your fellow shipmates that you're worth saving. You're worth putting into the lifeboat, because when you get to the deserted island and you have to start civilization from scratch, you're essential personnel, right? And so I said, I can tell these awesome stories and calm everybody down so nobody panics, jumps overboard, and everyone's cool. I'll write our history down as we make it, and I can sing and I can, entertain people. Yeah, you guessed it. You voted me like the first person to die in the example, like in the whole exercise, was me. I was the one. I think actually everybody else in class made it onto the boat but me. So I spent the better part of my life trying to figure out how to make myself essential to staying on the lifeboat and being on that island in a crisis, right? So I learned how to garden. I learned how to forage and figure out which plants are healthy and medicinal and which ones not to eat, and how to grow food and how to grow medicine. My garden today has food and medicine plants in it. And I also learned how to like shoot a bow and arrow in case I needed to fend off foes. I mean, I had like a whole why I shouldn't, be discarded resume that I apparently had built my entire life. And yet, right now, when we can't do one more night of Netflix and chill or board games, and we don't want to watch the news, and we're borderline freaking out, where are we? Storytime with Lisa. So I'm on this island with y'all. And my school trauma reminded me of my son Ian, and the fact that his first day of school, he was in kindergarten. He and Zoltan are just shy of 17 months apart in age. Ian didn't speak one solitary word when he started pre-K, not one word. And this, we figured out later, was because Zoltan was doing all the talking for him. And so day one, the teacher put my mute little Ian into a classroom separate from his brother. And we freaked out. We're like, that's not going to work, because he's not going to be able to communicate. Doesn't speak at all. He's totally nonverbal. And the teacher just calmly said, it's okay. So at the end of the day, my little mute child came running up to me, and Ian was like, Mommy, take a look at what I drew. And I had the best day, and I took a nap, and I ate all this food, and we had a great time. And I was like, okay, I'm an idiot. And I wrote this story for Ian, who, by the way, one of Ian's favorite animals, as it turns out today, is the possum. I feel like maybe this story has something to do with that somewhere, subliminally. It's called Sleeper's Awakening. Learning to tie his shoes had not been difficult for Sleeper Possum. This was because every time his shoes came undone, his older brother Russian would tie them for him. Rush, his mother would call, let him do it for himself. He's never going to learn if you keep on doing it for him. Yes, Ma, Rush would answer. Of course, he had no intention of paying her any mind because he was sure she was wrong. He let Sleeper try for himself, and it had taken him an eternity. In the end, he got it all wrong, so Russian had ended up tying them for him. It was always easier to do it himself. Besides, it made him feel so good to be the one that Sleeper came to for help. It made him feel big and important. It made him feel like a benefactor to his little brother. And Russian, well, he was always praised for his good works. Such a good one, they would say, and they'd pat him on the head. See how he cares for his little brother. So it went from tying his shoes to making his breakfast, and then to talking and to reading. Sleeper would start to struggle, and he'd try a new task, but Russian, well, he would just roll his eyes, and then he'd come to the rescue. No, no, no. Oh, he'd say, here, just let me show you. Now, it wasn't far to go from let me show you to here, let me do it. Then, of course, it was just a stroll over to don't bother, y'all never gonna get it right. Now, Sleeper, he was an easygoing possum. He saw how happy it made Russian to do things for him, so he just let his brother continue. He stopped trying and cooking and talking. Why, he very nearly stopped thinking. The thinking crisis, now that took place one day when they were preparing a little boat that Russian had made for her maiden voyage. They were going to sail this boat across the great big wide bay and right out into the ocean. Now, for months on end, Sleeper had hung by his tail from a nearby tree, and he watched his brother crafting that ship. Now, Sleeper was an excellent observer. He saw how his brother framed the hull and set the sides and caulked the gaps with a thick cotton rope. Now, he noted how Russian stepped the mast and rigged the running lines, too. Sleeper saw all of the beauty, but he also saw all of the flaws. He knew that while the craft was beautiful in line, it was not sturdy enough for the open sea. Anyone else would have mentioned this before the launching day, but Sleeper, well, he wasn't like everyone else. It's been so long since he'd done anything for himself that he just lost faith in his own judgment. He looked at the boat and he thought, now, if I were a smart possum, I'd say that that boat's going to fail its master at the first wind. Then he shook his head, tugged at his whiskers. No, he thought, can't be right. No. Now, Russian, he's a useful possum, and he can do anything, and, well, he's only going to tell me that I'm mistaken. Though Sleeper was an easygoing sort, he didn't like it when his brother chided him or made fun of his clumsy ways. It never occurred to him that he would not be clumsy if he practiced his tasks all by himself. Now, he had long forgotten he was not taking action in order to make his brother happy. Now he took no action because he was afraid of failing. He needed his brother's approval so much that now he was even starting to ask permission to eat into sleep. Russian had gone from feeling big and grand to feeling put upon and irritated. He still tied his brother's shoes and made his breakfast, and he spoke for him, only now it was all done in a martyred tone. Oh, you should just thank heaven that you have me here to help you out, Russian would say. I don't know how you'd make it on your own. Of course, helping you is my life. I'm just glad to do it for you. Russian had taken to letting out great and gusty sighs every time his little brother was about to try a new task. He'd roll his eyes and shook his head and twirled his whiskers knowingly. But by the time Russian's performance was over, well, Sleeper, he would just lower his head and turn the task over to his brother. He really is a little bit hopeless, Russian would tell people. It's exhausting to try and take care of him. Still find time for myself. So it had been until the day of the launching. Now, Russian had planned and packed and preened over his upcoming success. He'd made sure that Sleeper's bags were properly packed, and he'd refolded his brother's shirts just so. He made sure Sleeper had only the simplest of tasks for this event. Sleeper was the guy who's going to toss off the lines. But Sleeper was a nervous wreck. He'd practiced casting off the lines over and over and over again. The only problem was that he was not sure that he should do it when the time came. He had nightmares about that boat sinking. He'd not even gone so far as to take out a book from his brother's collection, and he started to read it in bed under the covers at night. Oh yes, Sleeper could read. He taught himself, but he tried hard not to let his brother know. He was sure that he really wasn't very good at it. Still, the book seemed to confirm his worst fears. That lumber that his brother had bought was far too thin, and it looked handsome, but it wasn't strong. Now it was time to face the day and his brother. Sleeper! Russian hissed in his ears. Are you daydreaming again? Oh, come on now, it's time to cast off the lines. All eyes were on Sleeper as he gripped the thick hemp in his paws. He looked from his brother to the other animals, all gathered on the dock. Sleeper cast off the first line. His brother nodded for him to cast off the second line, and Sleeper tossed it out to the crowd. But when it came time to release that third and final line, his paws just locked up in a death grip. Let it go. Russian started to shriek, what is wrong with you? But instead of letting go, Sleeper made his decision. And he went and he made the other two lines fast again. Then he took a deep breath and he faced his brother. Nearly apoplectic with frustration, Russian charged past his brother, knocking him to the deck. He would loose those doggone lines himself. I always had to do everything. Why should today be any different? The boat's gonna sink, Sleeper croaked out from a mouth that had gone dry with fear. You can't sail her. She's not sound. Russian dropped the line as if it had been a live snake, and he wheeled around. You have absolutely no idea what y'all talking about, he fumed. You can't even tie your own shoes, much less judge my work. Sleeper looked down at his shoes. No. All right, perhaps he'd been wrong to speak out. No. Despite the anger and the contempt that he saw on his brother's face, he knew that his brother loved him, and he loved Russian, and saving him was worth the wrath that was going to come his way as a result of this moment. So taking his time and choosing his words carefully, Sleeper explained his concerns about the boat. He even took out the book from his sea pack to illustrate his findings. Then he took a step off of the boat and onto the dock, and he waited for the worst to happen. Russian did not know what struck him more fiercely. The fact that he had not seen the boat's flaws, or that he'd been so blind to his brother's attributes. A parade of emotions marched through his mind. First was anger, followed by embarrassment and guilt, but then came pride. The pride was in his little brother. "You taught yourself to read?" he said softly. "Well, yes, but I'm sure I don't do it as well as you do," Sleeper said. Russian stepped off the boat and onto the dock beside his brother, and he put his arm around him. "I think you're better at it than I am," he said. "You read it, and then you put your knowledge to use." "I am sorry I was holding you back." "I'll let you do the holding," he answered. "I'm as much to blame." "Well, my friends," said Russian, "my brother has saved the day. All of these years I've been taking matters out of his hands. Well, today I find that in his hands I would gladly place my life." Looking solemnly at his brother, Russian said, "I hope that my little brother will never play possum again. It's far too dangerous a game." Once again, my apologies to all those who have actual Southern accents. I'm a New Yorker and I'm doing my best. That was written while we were in Southwest Florida, so it had that vibe. And our last story for tonight is Joey's Healing Story. Yep, the book's reversed, and there you go, because I'm using the back camera. Sometimes there are things that happen to us that change us. The change can be for better or worse. In the case of a small kangaroo's life being changed, it was both. Joey had always been a very kind and giving kangaroo. Although he was very poor, he always found something he could share with his friends and neighbors. Sometimes Joey would share a joke, sometimes a bunch of leaves that he had gathered that were especially tender. One day, however, Joey's wife was terribly sick, and he was out looking for some special herbs to make her well. After hours of searching, he finally found one tiny plant growing from a rock on a hillside. He heard a voice behind him. Please, could you share that with me?" said a chubby little wombat. "My neighbor, he's very ill with the mange, and that would cure him." For the first time in his life, Joey did not give a thought to anyone else. "I am sorry, but this is all there is, and I cannot spare any of it, or else my mate might not get well." Joey took off as fast as he could, and the chubby little wombat could not keep up. However, Joey could hear the wombat's pleas long after he was out of sight. He rushed home and he ground up all of the plant into some water to make a healing broth. His mate became healthy and strong soon after taking the medicine. Although Joey never saw the wombat again, he was haunted by his decision not to help him. He'd heard of the death of the wombat's neighbor and had decided never to tell anyone his terrible secret. It was certain his refusal to help had caused the death of the wombat's neighbor. I could have gone back. I could have searched for more herbs after I helped my mate, he thought bitterly. I could have given him half and the broth, and maybe he could have recovered. Days went by, and then weeks and months. Joey spent all of his spare time doing as many good deeds for others as he could think of. But his heart was still heavy with sadness over what he had done so long ago. With each day that he kept the secret locked in his heart, it grew more painful, worse than a thistle stuck in his paw. He was so angry with himself for his own mistake that any time he saw another animal make an error, he'd be very hard and cruel to them. For the most part, his friend thought he was the same, but inside, he grew cold and empty. He had changed. Then one day he found a golden eagle caught in a hunter's snare. The great bird beat its majestic wings furiously, but he could do nothing to free himself. Quickly, Joey hopped over and gnawed at the ropes, tugged with his paws until the bird was free. "Thank you, my friend," said the bird. "You are truly a good neighbor and a kind soul." With that, Joey began to cry as hard as he could, harder than he'd ever cried before. He just couldn't help it. "No, no, I'm terrible. I'm a beast." The bird covered Joey with his wings, and Joey poured out the whole tale that he'd never told another living soul. When he was done, the eagle said, "I'm sorry to tell you this, Joey, but you're not a terrible beast. You are just an ordinary animal who made a mistake you could not change." Joey cried. "I can't even ask the wombat's neighbor to forgive me because he's gone. I can't ever make it right." "Listen," said the eagle, "having the one you harmed forgive you would only make you feel better for a short while. You have to forgive yourself for your mistake." Slowly, Joey stopped crying. He realized that just telling his terrible secret to the stranger had made him feel a bit better. Inside, he began to feel warmer and more filled with good feelings than he had in years. The thistle was out of his heart, and he could begin now to heal his spirit. He thanked the eagle, and he hopped off for home, and along the way he gathered some tender leaves for his mate and some for his neighbors. Joey was a new kangaroo after that. Instead of criticizing others for their mistakes, he comforted them. Instead of doing good deeds to settle his guilt, he did them because his heart was once again full of love for other creatures. From then on, if he had a sorrow, he would confide his troubles in his mate or in a friend. He had learned that healing does not come from shame, anger, or empty acts, but from an honest and open heart. These are some really hard times we're in right now, and they're only looking like they're going to be getting a bit harder. And I have a feeling that at some point we're going to have to remember to forgive ourselves, to love ourselves, and then we can love our neighbors. Good night, and I'll see you here on the Life Raft tomorrow.